The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to this week's show here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegie and Bishop Doc Loomis. And hello, gentlemen.
Hey.
Morning. As we get rolling here on this day, as we take a look at different articles from this past week or so, and meanwhile, Robert is struggling with a pad of emojis. What are you going to do with that?
They're radio emojis.
Your radio emojis. You're going to put them
I'm
on the
gonna
microphone?
put them on the mic.
Yeah.
When I feel a certain mood come over me.
Yeah,
So that's what the
just hold
wrestling of the paper is all about. All right, I got
hold up
that.
the emoji that expresses your mood at any given
I
time.
will at any time. I'll hold it up.
And I'll know
for
not
all
to
the-
call on you.
All the fans at home.
All right, there you go. It's going to be that.
now.
It's going to be that kind of morning. All right, let's take a look at our first article here today. This comes from the Deseret News online, and it's about the University of Miami. The headline is "Why the University of Miami Plans to Hire a Scholar of Atheism." Well, why they plan to hire it is pretty evident, but they're going to couch it in lots of different terms here. But let's take a look at how this starts. The University of Miami will soon launch its search for a scholar of atheism, humanism, and secularism after a $2.2 million donation paved the way for the nation's first academic chair for the study of non-belief. Schools officials admit the position may raise eyebrows, but they argue that it's valuable to explore how the lack of belief informs worldviews in addition to looking at the world through the lens of faith, the New York Times reported. We didn't want anyone to misunderstand and think that this was to be an advocacy position for someone who's an atheist. Thomas LeBlanc, Miami's executive vice president and provost, told the Times, "Our religion department isn't taking an advocacy position when it teaches about Catholicism or Islam. Similarly, we're not taking an advocacy position when we teach about atheism or secular ethics." Well, let's follow the money. I think, Robert, first of all, isn't that just kind of a whitewash over the fact that they got a $2.2 million donation?
Yeah, isn't it kind of like redundant?
Yeah.
I mean, they already have departments of atheism, and most of the science departments are.
I wouldn't think they need $2.2 million to find this person, but they just go down the hall.
Yeah, we're going to create a department with a chair to study something we don't believe exists.
Well, you could apply for that.
I would love to be that. I think I might.
I think a Christian might actually be the
At
best
2.2,
person
I could
to
use
tell.
that pretty powerfully. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to live in Miami.
Yeah.
But
Well, now
this is Ohio.
We
isn't
joke about this, but they're taking this very seriously, Doc. I mean, they're saying that this is a serious course, a serious study, and should be treated as such. Except for maybe perhaps the guy who donated the money.
Give me an emoji, Robert.
He needs one.
Give me the one where he's holding his ears.
Yeah.
That's a good one. We're having a lot more fun in the studio than you are at home this morning. We understand that. Yeah, Corey, it is a serious study. I mean, the study of the absence of something is really remarkable. I just don't get it. But secularism, humanism, I get that. There are classes that study secularism, humanism, nihilism. That's fine. Mm-hmm. This is, as you've pointed out so succinctly, which is why I'm wondering how we're going to stretch this to a 12-minute segment, is because a guy is ready to write a $2.2 million check. And he was only willing to write the check if the word atheism was in the name of the chair.
Correct.
Okay. Here's what gets me about this. in all of human history, there are people who are atheists, there are people who worship false gods, there are people who do evil in the sight of God. But the way God seems to work is that when we elevate that kind of stuff and we put it in a chair, or we put it on a throne, or we erect a statue to it, that seems to be the line that gets crossed. You think of in the divided kingdom, what was Ahab's son, Ahaziah or whatever, who worshipped Baal, and he put up the Baal statue, and that's when God got honked. When the children were wandering in the desert, and then they built a golden calf, that's when God got honked.
Smashed a few tablets.
Yeah, so if you look at this in terms of what's going on right now, we are putting these people on our Supreme Courts. We're putting them in endowed chairs in universities. We're putting them in charge of our military as secretaries of defense. And what happens is, I think that we are putting people on chairs, and God he's just not going to not notice that.
He's not going to ignore that.
No, he's not going to ignore it.
Yeah, Louis Appignani, who donated the $2.2 million to Miami and demanded that the academic title include the word atheism, told the Times that he hopes the position will help eliminate discrimination against non-believers. This is a step in that direction to make atheism legitimate, he said.
But we're not advocating for atheism. We just want to make it legitimate.
Yes, validate it.
Give it a chair.
Yeah.
If you give it a chair, that
give
makes
it a chance.
It's a real opportunity.
Give it a chair. Give it a chance. That's
obviously this guy's spending $2.2 million to not advocate for atheism or humanism or materialism or scientism or evolutionism or whatever the ism is you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
It's ludicrous, but this is the world we live in, isn't it? This is everything is okay. I'm okay. You're okay. We're all okay. Just believe whatever you want to believe, and it makes no difference whatsoever. There are no boundaries. There are no border lines. There's no perimeters. There's no fences. There's nothing. Just go for it. And there's a warning in the Bible about this, isn't there? Mm-hmm. When everyone does what seems right in their own understanding, and we're coming to that place pretty rapidly where we're actually codifying all this stuff. Right. It's going to be fun watching the fireworks on this one.
And the thing is, it's the University of Miami. I mean, it's a public university.
Yes.
So. And a lot of times in these universities, it's alumni that stand up and say something about this, but no word here.
Oh,
that's going to happen.
The Christians are cowering. Yeah, they're not stepping up on this one. It's fascinating. People will push and push and push and push. and push, right? And they'll go as far as you'll let them go. So it's there needs to be a debate. I want to invite this guy to a debate. Whoever gets that chair, I want to get him up and let's have a debate. Not necessarily with me, but I think Doc would do a great job on that and have a slogum debate on this whole thing.
But that's why I said actually Christians or rabbis could probably teach this class because they've encountered the thoughts and the challenges before. I mean, they understand that perspective pretty well. I would think that actually ends up probably being a part of our discussion.
Atheism is well represented on the college campus. I don't know how this guy thinks it's not represented.
What did he say that he became an atheist when he was in college?
Yes.
Well, that's the beauty of the whole article. Yeah. It's like he's building his own Ebenezer, and I'm going to put a chair in college so that every other child can have the same opportunity I did to lose my faith in college,
which he was very successful at doing, evidently,
apparently,
without a chair,
apparently.
Yeah. So what's the need for a chair? I mean, it's as a former member of our group would say. It's much ado about nothing.
Well, now this is just me. I don't know a lot about this stuff. I performed very poorly in college. When you have an endowed chair, is there physically a chair?
No, it's
more so than an office.
It's a euphemism.
There's an office.
Yeah.
So one would assume it would have a chair.
Yeah.
But it's
it
does.
It's
not a special chair.
No, it's not a special chair.
Okay, I always wondered that.
It's like chairman of the department. sort of euphemistic.
Whatever you want to say about it.
Yeah.
Right. You need an emoji
Okay,
for
so
that.
in this case, because he's the chair of nothing, he definitely would not have, probably won't have an office.
No, they'll probably
He
give him.
exists in
They
his
probably
mind.
won't do anything at all.
He
They're
exists
just-
in his mind.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea of it is not apparently new. It says Pitzer College, a liberal arts college in Claremont, California, created a program in secular studies in 2011. It offers courses like secularism and skepticism, sociology of secularity, and monkey business, controversies in human evolution, according to the school's website.
But they're not advocating for a particular position in this at all.
But
They're
it
neutral.
is interesting. The study of atheism would be the study of what? I mean, it'd be the study of how we don't believe. It'd be actually
Exactly.
studying exactly what we believe, right? It's what the other side believes.
You have to. I mean,
It would-
you got to go there.
Standout line in the article is this one. LeBlanc is the provost and senior vice president for the university. Asked whether he anticipated any backlash. I'm going to read this and then I'm going to translate it for you at home. Mr. LeBlanc said, "This is an area where people can get overly excited if they don't actually look carefully at what is happening." Translation, this is an area where Christians can get overly excited if they don't actually believe what we believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
right.
That's exactly right. So close your mouth and go away. You know, the what
Applications
was
are
the
now being
statistic?
accepted,
The
yeah.
statistic was only 3.1% of U.S. adults identify as atheists.
Right.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
There you go. We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Welcome back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Robert Cornegay and Bishop Doc Loomis. And today we want to talk about a number of different kinds of articles, really. And we're going to go to a different subject on the second segment. And this comes from the website called Christian Today. And the headline is Muslims Converting to Christianity in Saudi Arabia Despite Intense Persecution. The headline may be a little bit misleading in the article because there's not a lot about the conversion process, so we get mostly through the article. But it begins by talking about Islam in Saudi Arabia. It's a state religion. It's a legal system based on Sharia law. Courts regularly impose severe physical punishment, including the death penalty for apostasy, and non-Muslim places of worship are prohibited. According to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, Saudi Arabia remains uniquely repressive in the extent to which it restricts the public expression of any religion other than Islam. And then it also goes on to say, however, though there are 1.4 million Christians living in the country, according to a study earlier this year, 4.4% from Saudi Arabia's population identifies as Christian, up from less than 0.1%, really 50 people just over 100 years ago. In 1910, but most of these really are expats, expatriates, or migrant workers, according to persecution charity Open Doors, the Saudi natives are also turning to Christianity. Now, I know you guys are in touch often with people in other parts of the world. Are you hearing this story? Are you hearing about converts in some of this parts of the world?
Yeah, I know for at our church, we support a ministry that is exclusively for basically Muslims in the 1040 window, I guess they call it. Mm-hmm. You know, in that band that runs through the Middle East, and we don't have anybody right now in Saudi Arabia, but we do have in other Pakistan and Iran and other countries, Egypt, and there is a phenomena going on of Jesus is showing up in
some revival.
dreams and all kinds of things. and through the work of missionaries. I mean, there are obviously people that are going in there and risking their lives.
You're talking about Jesus and the Middle Eastern dreams that
Yes.
these thousands of people have seen him in the night.
Exactly. Yeah. And they're converting to Christ. They're having an encounter. They're having a revelation experience, and they're crying out. You know, they see what's going on in Islam, and the violence and persecution and all of this which is just a normal part of the system, and they're reacting to it. Yeah.
Doc, are you hearing similar stories?
Well, we all read stories about the emergence of Christianity in countries. Most notably, we think about what's happened in the Middle East, what's happening in China, what's happening in Africa, in parts of Africa, not exclusively East Africa, but the emergence in Nigeria and other nations. Yeah, absolutely. The thing that is alarming that this article points out in groups like World Watch and the Pew Foundation is that for the most part, Christian persecution is up everywhere, not just here in Saudi Arabia.
That's right.
I can't remember what the numbers are, but I think it's 58 of 93 countries that Pew watches and ranks now have rankings of high or very high persecution for Christians. 53 of 98. That's up from like 20-some just maybe 10 years ago. So persecution is also growing at an alarming rate. The easy thing the easy conclusion to draw would be, I think, a conclusion I often hear my pastor friends say, and that is that, well, persecution is the fertilizer of the church. That when the church is persecuted, it grows. And I don't know how you all feel about this, but I don't think that's exactly that's not a real perfect argument. Sometimes
that would almost be an argument for it, and that's not.
Well, no, we certainly please do not persecute us. But it is. I hear this a lot. Do you hear this in your ratio meeting? This idea that go ahead and persecute us, because if you do, we're just going to grow.
Yeah, sadly, it's like, how does the church get awakened? Well, it's usually through persecution. So that's that's kind of
persecution always does.
The idea has a consequence. If you start becoming a threat, and this is where Mark would talk about that the church becomes powerful enough to be a threat to the governing authorities, whatever it is, then they're going to persecute the church because they're not going to permit a threat. And so persecution often does. It's martyrs are the seed of the church. So,
but instead of taking a look at how the church has survived and thrived in spite of persecution, that's a little different perspective, I think, isn't it?
Well, there's no question that persecution purifies the church. Because, I mean, if you're not really a believer and somebody walks up to you and says, "Are you a believer?" Because if you are, I'm going to shoot you, and you're not a believer, you're probably going to say no. So there is there's a little, wheat and chaff division thing going there. And the other thing that persecution often does is it disperses the church. One of the things, if you remember, in Japan, Christianity was a real big deal back in the 15th, 16th century when it came over there. But along came the 17th century and it was banned completely. And a lot of the people who left Japan during that time went to places like China, and actually just, the seeds of Christianity began moving. But the idea that persecution always produces a big fruit for the church, I don't think is accurate. We could see that we could see it. It did kill the church in Japan. It basically killed the church in North Africa. Most of Asia Minor, which we know was a very productive field for early Christians, has lost Christianity almost completely now. So all I'm saying is I think persecution purifies. I think it disperses. But I don't think it's something that we want to pray for to make the church better. It's just
because it's God's grace just carries people through that, right? Beyond and then helps with that seed planting, as you mentioned. So.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? The persecution that came into to Rome and to the Roman Church in different areas, and how the Christians were the ones that were providing the care and going above and beyond and loving without boundaries, and in a very, very hostile environment. And so Christianity can't exist, but it does. It is. That's why we're instructed to pray for peace. To live our lives as peacemakers, because the multiplication of the church is in those times of peace.
But this article,
as well.
this article goes on to say and describe a local Saudi who is being helped through this charity to converted while he was visiting in another part of the world, and he comes back and he's going to be very lonely. He's going to be alone there because he can't be seen around the expatriates either, with a Bible or anything else, because the persecution could be very severe in Saudi Arabia. So, and the U.S. has been criticized, and points out here, the U.S. has been criticized too for that relationship that we have with Saudi Arabia, and that's follow the money there about oil.
Yeah, going way back. Yeah.
So is there in countries like this, we want to talk about the hope for these people, but where do we go? I mean, where you talk about supporting missionaries in that part of the world, but probably not there.
Yeah, no, it's usually in for instance, a lot of the work that's being done in Afghanistan and in Pakistan and in Iran is actually being done in in Turkey.
Right.
Where they haven't, the level of persecution hasn't risen,
but it is on the rise.
It's on the rise. That's right.
Well, that's the challenge. 3/4 of the world's population now lives in a country that is very much against Christianity. That's another number that's just gone through the roof in the last 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
3/4 of the population of the whole world lives in a place where you don't actually want to be caught on the street proclaiming the gospel or carrying a Bible. That's never been that way.
No.
This is
that
that
percentage.
is a frightening number.
Yeah, that's right.
Even you mentioned China and the history of China, the whatever dynasty, some supported, some didn't. They kicked them out, they went back in, and now we see some acceptance, sort of an odd dichotomy of official church versus underground church.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you do kind of start thinking this conclusion that persecution is what generates revivals. What do you think about that, Doc? Is that the way that works? That persecution, that the great revivals that we've had in throughout Europe or in Wales or in the United States, was that because of persecution, or was that because of coming to an awareness of personal sin and failing? And how does persecution play into revival? That particularly in a country that's hostile to your very existence there, you're not going to have a big outbreak of revival. I don't see happening. You're going to have to leave. The revival may go somewhere else. It won't be there. Is that a?
Well, I think isn't that what happened in this country? I mean, really, people left. A hostile environment kind of came here. Revival flourished here. First of all, revival does follow persecution, but it's not caused by persecution.
Right.
I don't feel that. I feel that what happens is that revival actually starts in a person. It starts in people, and people who are being persecuted do tend to look for more. They do tend to look for something, for God's help. The other thing, beyond, and the other thing is, I actually believe in a God that looks at his persecuted people and says, "I'm not going to allow them to be this way. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do something that's going to be supernatural. That's going to bring about in the hearts of these people that transformation and that revival."
Yeah.
So I think it's God looking at his children as he always has throughout history and said, "No more. You don't do that to them."
So it can have a part, but it isn't. It isn't all of it. It's the heart change is where revival comes from.
And as you said, though, it often begins with that personal recognition of sin.
Yeah, that's right.
And the tears flow and the revival comes. Right.
Exactly.
We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Back to Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and I'm Ben Bald. Along with Bishop Doc Loomis and Reverend Robert Cornegy, let's talk a little bit about a subject that we have visited on many occasions, but it has come back up in the last week or so, and it's the Little Sisters of the Poor case before the Supreme Court. Because once the Supreme Court decided that they were and again, they're an 8-person court now. Once they decided that they were not going to hear this case again, or not going to hear the appeal that came from a lower court of the Little Sisters of the Poor, they sent it back to the lower court, and it was often called a punt in the media and various articles about it. It's taking kind of the easy way out by using a sports analogy. That's what we do sometimes. So the various articles have been written now, and this one from the Catholic News Service, debunking that idea. This one is titled, Supreme Court's Zubik Decision is More Compromise Than Punt, Some Argue. Carol Zimmerman, writing in the Catholic News Service, says immediately after the Supreme Court sent the contraceptive case back to the lower courts May 16th, some called the decision a punt, the football analogy of sending the ball back to the other team, or in this case, the lower courts. But the analogy falls short on a practical level because the 7 consolidated cases in Zubik will be sent back to the lower courts with a very different look, bearing the stamp of being vacated by the nation's highest court. The 3rd, 5th, 10th, and D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, which ruled in favor of the Affordable Care Act's contraceptive mandate, did not see it as posing a substantial burden to the petitioner's free exercise of religion, now must give another look at the same issue, equipped with new information submitted to the Supreme Court showing a possible compromise. So in a sense, they've added some asterisks to this, to their previous decision, the lower court's decision, saying, well, you may not be completely wrong, but you may not be completely right. So go back and let's look at this again. You may come to a similar conclusion, but you got to come at it a different way. Do you think that's a fair way of saying that, Robert?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, the word that keeps I'm stumbling over is that their decision, the lower court's decision, was vacated.
Right.
By the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know what that really means. I'm assuming that means that it was denied. That decision was.
It means their logic was not correct, or their argument for.
They can't come back with that same argument.
Erases the opinion.
Right,
and
exactly.
They have to come back and do it again.
So it's a clean slate. They're going to go through it again and argue through it again. So
now the courts basically have not changed in their position or their makeup, so they will likely come to a very similar conclusion, but the Supreme Court has said you have to do it at least with some caveats now. And I think this is complicated, it gets in the weeds, but Doc, the basic understanding is for the Little Sisters of the Poor and other religious organizations is we just don't want to have anything at all to do with this mandate.
Yes, and that's not possible.
Yeah.
I mean, the courts can rule all they want on this, but as long as there is a healthcare system in place, anything like the one we have now, then those of us who pay into it are going to be paying into things that we don't want to pay into. So it's I appreciate very much them taking that is the Little Sisters taking this position, filing the lawsuit. But in the end, I don't think there's a way that the Supreme Court can rule in favor of non-participation. I just don't see that happening.
You know, that's why this is a constitutional crisis, is because set into our Bill of Rights is religious freedom, freedom of conscience. Mm-hmm. And so they're basically consciously objecting to this. Like in the military, we used to, I guess they still have it, that you serve an alternate way. They make a workaround so that if you are not warrior, then you can find another route. So that, to me, that's what they're saying, is that these courts are going to have to work a little harder, not just giving the benefit of the doubt to the government's mandate, but to say there has to be some way to satisfy both parties, this is King Solomon stuff.
Yeah.
You know, split the baby. I mean, I don't know how you do this.
Well, to use another cruder analogy, it's lipstick on a pig. You know, it's still a pig.
There is one thing I have not understood. There are workarounds on the Affordable Care Act already. Mm-hmm. I mean, any number of my friends, in fact, we almost did it a couple months ago, have gone with these independent, self-paid insurance programs. In fact, they're largely touted as being Christian programs. You can be a part of this program and, not step outside of what you believe. And the people that I know that are a part of these things actually are really happy with them.
I used to do it. When we were missionaries, we were involved with Samaritan ministry.
I know some people
it was
that are doing it,
fantastic.
All right, so here's the question. And while I understand that this is taking a stand for religious liberty, why would the Little Sisters of the Poor simply not pay into a program like that?
Well, those fall under, some of them fall under health savings accounts. I don't know if that exactly works that way. But
are they only available to individuals?
It may be. I don't know that a group could come in. I don't know enough about it. I was an individual. I did it as an individual. And
the only
as a
ones
family,
I know
Josie and I mean, we did it together with our children.
But I've worked in companies where I was a part of a group plan and then opted as an individual for that. And I would have to think if everybody else in the company opted as an individual. I'm just asking the question.
Yeah.
Why don't they just go to the place where they know that's not going to happen?
Well, yeah, I think it's the stopping the camel's nose under the edge of the tent is what's going on.
I think, frankly, we just haven't seen the challenge to that, because there would be any number, because I don't know, for example, in those policies, if they prohibit contraception or something, because there's a lot of religious groups that don't prohibit it. So they would have to have a challenge.
You have to
that.
assume the government's just kind of looking the other way right now. It's fighting some other fights right now, and they may come to that. But I would fear for that. But
so why choose that battle here? I mean, why put up such a fight over this in this mandate?
Again, the camel's nose under the tent. Eventually, you get the whole camel. And so I believe there is a real effort, and if you have an organized effort, obviously there are other organizations that are 7 or 8 that are in this battle with,
and the Beckett Fund is behind them.
Yeah,
So I mean,
exactly.
this is not small potatoes.
So
question.
this is a big deal. This is a showdown.
Yeah.
And if there's the political angle that's coming in, and the legal angle, and the political angle is trying to throw it out. They want to,
unless the court changes dramatically, unless the administration changes dramatically in this next election, this goes nowhere.
The lawyer for the Beckett Fund said that the Supreme Court was not just returning the cases to the lower courts, but was, quote, very specific in its order and outlined several points, such as forbidding the government from levying fines on the groups that objected to the contraceptive coverage. The fines against the Little Sisters of the Poor was into the millions already.
Yes.
Erasing previous court decisions and telling the courts to essentially find a feasible resolution. In other words, when the court sent these cases back, it also sent guidelines for a new way forward. You can do this in a different way. Now you have to go back and do it. So, again, like I said before, the court makeup hasn't changed. And it wouldn't even change with an administration change unless there were a lot of judges that all of a sudden quit. But so a lot of that court makeup will stay there, and so they may come to very similar conclusions, but they may also come to some dangerous ones as well as far as Christian belief goes.
Well, there's a troubling comment made at the end of the article by a Notre Dame law professor, Garrett, and he says, to the extent the right to religious freedom is regarded as a luxury good, a license to do wrong, or as special pleadings by the culture war losers, it is increasingly vulnerable. This should concern us all, because believers and non-believers alike benefit from a legal and cultural commitment to religious freedom and have a stake in the legal regime that respects and protects it. And so, in other words, we're seeing a government force hostile to religious freedom. That's the battle.
If our faith is being thought of in the same way as an SUV, that we're going to tax it because it's inefficient.
Correct.
That it doesn't do our bidding. Then we're going to find a way to do it.
And so what you're saying basically is that obviously from their previous decision, the lower courts had decided that this was wrong for these groups to continue to fight against this.
Yeah.
And so the question is,
I think they'll still find it wrong.
Yeah.
But they may find the least intrusive. This is one of the standards about least intrusive means of achieving this. The least intrusive will be just to say the insurance companies are going to pay for it, or taxpayers are going to pay for it. You won't even know it. We won't even bring it up. You won't have to sign anything. It'll just happen.
It's just amazing that a country that was founded with religious freedom in mind, not just in mind, but forefront,
Yes.
front of mind,
Yes.
is now deigning to accommodate us who are
Right.
religious.
That's right.
That's the turn, and
Right.
that's the thing that's very frightening.
We're going to permit you to do moral wrong,
right.
is what they're saying.
Yeah, and accommodation is a
Yeah.
just a dangerous word. Even that.
Yeah, this is pretty serious.
So what will happen, and what do we do as people of faith? I mean, we're watching this erosion of a freedom here that's been called by the court now simply a tax. So, what do we do? What's next?
Why is everybody pointing at me? I don't.
It's your turn. Last word.
I say we pray for revival. We pray for the changing of the hearts of people in Congress and in the White House and in our court systems, and we ask God to get involved. Confess our sins and get into 2 Chronicles 7:13-14 mode and go on with life.
Come, Lord
Jesus
Jesus.
is coming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and he said the gates of hell shall not prevail. And so but that means we need to prevail on our knees. I believe that's where this is going.
In our final segment this morning, we're going to talk about a subject that everybody's been talking about around the country, even around the world, and we're going to get to that coming up in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Here's our final segment now on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and with Robert Cornegie and also Bishop Doc Loomis. I'm Ben Ball, and thanks for joining us here this morning. And we want to do a brief look at a story that everybody's talking about, and that's this story about the gorilla, the Cincinnati Zoo, and the young boy who fell into the enclosure. Charles Camasey writes in this online article called by crux.com, and it's taking the Catholic pulse is what the theme of this online site. And the commentary is, can a gorilla be a victim of Pope Francis's throwaway culture? So we're going to put the Pope into this article too, in this story. By now, the story is familiar to hundreds of millions of people all over the world. A young boy crawled over a barrier and fell 15 feet into water of a gorilla enclosure at the Cincinnati Zoo. And one of the primates, Harambe, dragged the boy out of the water, well, actually dragged him through the water. Eyewitnesses disagree about the level of danger to the boy, but the episode ended with the 17-year-old gorilla being shot and killed. I think everybody knows this story. I mean, after all, have you gone a day since this has happened without somebody bringing it up? I don't think so.
You can't go on social media without seeing it. I mean, it's everywhere.
It is. But this article goes on to say, Commonweal contributor Anthony Arnett noted that something is very seriously wrong when we talk about animals rather than the hundreds of migrants dying in the Mediterranean. Catholic blogger Matt Walsh called the killing of the jungle beast a happy ending and castigated a culture which prioritizes animals over babies killed in abortion. Is this the right response, especially in a Catholic context? Well, it depends on what we think or how we think about moral status. Morally speaking, what is Harambe? Non-humans have significant moral value. God creates animals good, period, without any reference to human beings. The Catechism teaches that we owe animals kindness. Church fathers insisted Christians shouldn't attend Roman games where animals were being slaughtered. Sport hunting was expressly forbidden in many contexts. The tradition would change with Vatican II. And then it goes on to, I actually quote from Pope Francis, Laudato Si, is that how you say that? Close. It says, not only insists that animals will be part of the new creation of the kingdom of God, but also that the pierced heart of the Blessed Mother grieves for the sufferings of the creatures of this world laid waste by human power. I think we can look at many examples in our culture where we have taken an anthropomorphic stance and projected human qualities on animals. And that's, I call it the Disneyfying of animals, because we see it so many, it's in cartoons and so many beloved, and we can start with Bambi and move on from many others there too, where we see human faces on these animals. Is that fair, unfair, true, not true? What do you guys think? Doc, you've been designated as the start.
I am so disliked among my friends because being raised on a farm and then raising cattle ourselves,
Right.
I tended to look at a cow as not probably the same way, I don't know, not the same way that Chick-fil-A does. I look at a cow and I say, "You're what's for dinner," okay? Or the same way Chick-fil-A does. I'm sorry.
Actually, yeah.
You're what's for dinner. And so I didn't, you can't think about the food aspect particularly. Now, of course, the great apes don't fit into that category per se. But, it is interesting. We have anthropomorphized animals largely because of movies, and before that, books. Dumbo was a book long before it was a movie.
Even there we have cows writing, eat more chicken.
Exactly. So we have, they named this critter's name is Harambe, which is a Swahili word, which means let's pull together. It's the idea that men and people and animals should pull together. They gave them this wonderful name. So, do you have a question in that, Ben?
Well, I just actually wondered what you.
Or do you just
thought
want to hear
about
what
this
Harambe?
idea. But I mean, do you agree or disagree that our culture has slipped into this idea, and is religion following it? Are some people of faith following that into making this part of God's creation a higher level? Is that getting to a?
Yeah, well,
More
you
of a
got to
question.
look. First thing I learned when I became a pastor was that you got to make sure that all the animals go to heaven. Whatever your theology is, you got to make sure that they get there, because the little white-haired ladies with the little yappy little dogs,
Pekingese.
they love their dogs if they had children, like they had children, and if they didn't have children, these are their children. And so it's I know I'm probably everybody's switching off the radio right now.
No, they did
but
that the minute we mentioned great apes. I think here's a story
Not
everybody's
again.
listening to.
No, I think I'd actually back on emojis.
Yeah, that may have done it.
That was it. But
They're, and that's fascinating that they link this through the Catholic Church. I mean, to be able to get this applied to the teaching of the Pope is just remarkable to me. This guy did some
I don't think it's that much of a
amazing
stretch.
work.
Really?
Yeah. Well, the reason I say that is because I don't think the Pope was trying to say that the gorilla is human and has human rights. I don't think that
No, he's saying
animals.
it's going to be a part of the new creation.
Right,
That was his-
exactly.
that was his deal.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're good. God said that.
But they'll be friendly then.
Exactly right. They won't be
Well,
doing things that
It's in his April
gorillas
papal,
do now.
April
As
papal
in-
decree. Yes.
as in Eden, it will be a peaceable kingdom.
That's exactly right. So I have no problem with that. But they are, as Doc mentioned, we tend to forget the way our food sources are set up now. We don't kind of lose touch with that idea that we're actually eating animals. And that,
Right.
there's a whole disconnect here between we can eat certain animals but not other animals. And so Peter Singer, he's the ethicist at Princeton. I mean, he's saying, animals are people too. And they should have the same rights extended to them that human beings have extended. And so we're playing
Except
around.
he's not extending many there.
Well, apparently he's never driven a car through North Carolina in the evening because he's murdered thousands of little 1-inch human beings that are flying in the air.
Exactly.
this
Or
is
deer.
This is the challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, the article here says, and this again, it's a commentary, says, but Laudato Si risks collapsing creatures together into an indistinguishable mass. Are there no moral distinctions to be made between stalactites, dandelions, mosquitoes, rats, pigs, and gorillas? We clearly see there are, and we also understand the blessings of animals too, right?
Absolutely.
So that's not really anathema to faith.
Look, I love my chickens. I have chickens, and I really have a relation. And
Have you named them?
I have not. Well, I did the first ones that the neighbor's dog got, but I had named him Drumstick and Chicken Fingers and
Thigh Baby, I think was the other one, wasn't it? Fry Baby, whatever it was.
yeah, and but no, the Hot Wings was the
Hot Wings.
Hot
Oh my
Wings.
gosh.
But we love the relationship that we have with animals, but
Right.
but if you have a choice between saving the life of a child or saving the life of a hostile gorilla,
Right. Well, see,
you're going to choose, hopefully, the child.
you point
The
out
human
though,
child.
exactly where a lot of people even looking at the cell phone video that was taken of this, which even if they see it all, they still say, well, look, he held his hand, or look, he propped him up. But then he also dragged him through the moat. I mean, they were face down. There was no, he doesn't make a distinction. And so we projected, though, this human emotion onto this ape. Now, they're highly intelligent. Again, they can have emotive feelings
Of course
as
they
well.
can.
But they can also he could throw that kid up against the wall with the strength of 10 men.
That's right.
So
The question is, what would Diane Fossey have done? I mean, there again, here's a woman who lived with gorillas her entire adult life and was ultimately killed by one.
Yeah.
It's hard to know. It was a difficult decision for the zoo, I'm sure. You know what's interesting? Well, maybe it will only be interesting to me, but we'll see. Is the Native American view of animals and humans and our interaction, the commonality of the spiritual side of our nature, but the absolute the necessity to one consume the other, but in doing so to give thanks both to the animal and to their God for the provision of that animal. That has always seemed to me to be one of the remarkable healthy ways of viewing the way that God has created the world. Again, it has nothing to do with a kid getting dragged through a moat. I just find it interesting, and we're still got 3 minutes to go.
Well, look, I say a prayer every time I eat a meal, and I thank God for that hamburger or that fish or whatever it is that I'm eating. I do. I mean, I
It's a
see
blessing.
him as
Yeah.
provider
Right.
of this. And, but,
and
the question was asked in one of the articles, I read about what would have happened if they had tried to save the child and he had been killed in the process.
We cannot end on that note.
How would people be reacting? And so, you really do have to get it in perspective. You have to figure it out.
we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.